Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Dana. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ramona. Hi, Lorianne.
Good morning.
Oh, I should change my name. Is one of the presenters signing in from Crittenton Services of Greater Washington? Do you know?
Yes, there should be a panelist.
Okay, great. I
yeah.
just saw the organization name, so I will let them in right. Wow, my keyboard has stopped working. Where'd it go? Admit. Okay. Great. How is everybody this morning?
Great.
So I don't know if we had a chance to meet because I know there was a mix-up when I did the test session. So I'm Kate Hall. I am with Maryland Nonprofits. I will be your host, and I have Ramona with me as well, who will be the co-host, and we will support you in any way that we can through the presentation. Let me make you all co-hosts so you can get started that. Is there one of you that's going to primarily be sharing your screen?
No, I don't think any of us are sharing screen.
Okay. Awesome.
I feel really like I have too much power being a co-host. You might want to tamp that down.
All right. Do you have any questions for us before we get started?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Did we get anybody to sign up for the session?
Yeah, it looked like there were, I think 22 or something when I saw it yesterday, but I will admit I did not look this morning. Let's see if I can get it to come up on the app. Oh, no, it's not showing me.
22 seems like a goodly number.
Yeah, we'll see. Oh, I wonder if this is, you have one more presenter, right, Karan?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna let the Maryland nonprofit person in, and maybe it's her. Hello, unnamed Maryland nonprofit person.
Good morning. How are
I
you?
had a feeling.
It's me. All right. So our guests, I asked them to be, oh, they're here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Everyone's here.
Good morning,
Oh.
everyone.
Good morning.
Okay. Are you all ready?
Good morning. We're ready.
Okay. Looks
All right.
Do you have any information for us, Kate? We sort of met as a group a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to ask questions. They're going to answer them.
Okay.
Keith does have to pop off around 11:15, 11:30. He's just going to play it by ear. Good morning, Keith.
Morning.
And you want to pause the recording, Kate? Oh, okay. Can you pause the recording?
Yep.
So we are here today to talk about what is the new normal. And I am not going to prolong this time. I am really, really excited about today's roundtable discussion as we have some phenomenal guests. Everyone here happens to be a MARFY member, so let me acknowledge our wonderful MARFY members. We have Dana Carr from the Leaders of Tomorrow Youth Group. So I just as I said that, Dana, I realized you were also part of Maryland Nonprofits. So Dana's with Maryland Nonprofits. She's the executive director of Leaders of Tomorrow Youth Center. We do have two MARFY members here. That's Keith Fanjoy, and he's the president and CEO of Sanmar Family and Community Services Organization. Laura Ann Spagnola, and she's known affectionately as LA. And she's the president of Board of Child Care. And then my dear friend, Siobhan Davenport, is the president CEO of Crittenton's, which we hope one day will become a MARFY member because they also engage with youth. So I'm not going to prolong their introductions. We're actually going to hop right in here with some questions. Please utilize the chat. We will be actually stopping as we go through these great questions to talk about what does this new normal really look like for your agency. So the first question I have here, what strategies or technique have you seen be deemed effective around moving your organization forward, especially during this pandemic? Anyone who wants to go first?
I will jump in. Again, I'm Dana Carr. I am the executive director of Leaders of Tomorrow Youth Center, and we are a nonprofit, arts education-based nonprofit that serves youth and families around the arts in the state of Maryland and also in DC. I think that it was an advantage of us being artists and all being creative beings during the pandemic, because one of the strategies, general strategies that I think helped us is just relying on creativity. I think that, for us all, we had to, of course, shift the way that we may have normally done operations. For us, we were providing direct services in a lot of schools and community centers. And so, of course, once those shut down, we had to be creative about how we were going to still be able to provide those services now virtually. I think that also being able to be flexible was a strategy that we had to employ and realize that, things were not normal anymore, you know what I mean? And that we had to be open to, just other possibilities, things that we may not have even thought about in terms of how we were going to serve both our youth and our families. So I think that there was a lot of collaboration, I will say, just relying on my team, not being, the only person who was sort of coming up with solutions and coming up with possibilities. I know for us, we did a lot more meeting and collaborating and strategic thinking, again, because we needed everybody at the table to come with ideas, because we had to keep pushing, we had to keep moving forward. I only have but so many ideas. So I needed to rely on my team members to really, again, be able to think outside of the box, which I think, again, just us being creative beings already, and a lot of us having those arts backgrounds helped us to be able to figure out other possibilities.
Great. LA, I see you on mic. Did you want to jump in?
Sure. I would say that one of the things that we used as a strategic advantage was really taking a look at our meeting rhythms, meetings that we already had in place, and making sure that we had, because if you remember, everything was changing. Now the pace of change has really slowed down, but in the beginning, having an opportunity that you knew that people were going to be gathering with some kind of reasonable method, like you knew that everybody was going to be together at certain times, really gave us an opportunity to focus on our communication and making sure that we talked about complicated things in a way that made sense to people, and that we made sure that everybody was on the same page. So we created things like talking points when things would change, like with visitation or whatever. And we created flip charts that made it easy for implementation across the areas that we work. So I think there were some tools that we really enhanced during the process that we can see as helping us really get through this difficult time in a way that seemed manageable.
Thank you. And so, I noticed on the app for the conference, someone asked the question, when are we going to stop using the word new normal, or the phrase new normal? So I want to hop in real quick. I want to give some statistics just to really frame how we've shifted from what life looked like in the professional sector from 2010 to 2020 to now 2021. So to give you some data, in April of 2021, there were temporary layoffs at 2.1 million. That was down from 18 million in April of 2020. Unemployment was at 9.8 million, which was down from 14.7 in April 2020. I would say prior to COVID, the nonprofit sector was offering 12.5 million jobs. In May of 2020, people lost jobs. There was like 13%. 50.6% jobs were recovered, thank goodness, in April 2021. But I know we're going to talk about this on here. In 2021, we are still struggling with staff shortages, where our EDs and our CEOs of our child welfare organizations are having to step up and carry large caseloads because they cannot find people to come and work, or don't want to work, or have no desire to work, or have changed careers, or whatever the case may be. So, and also there was an increase in unrestricted gifts around giving. 9% of the dollars, 21% of donations were described as unrestricted or flexibles. And again, we're going to talk about later the burnout that really exists now. So I wanted to share, we have to continue to say the new normal, because literally I know in our work, it shifts every day. What's new, what we have to do different. It's just like mind blowing. So my next question would be, during the times, where we're talking about here, where we serve as leaders, how are you ensuring a solid work-life balance for yourself, so you are able to show up for your staff and your team, and then promote a work-life balance for your team and staff to prevent burnout? And I say that because, again, you're having to carry those workloads, and your team are having to pick up slack as well. So what does that look like for you all?
Sure, I'll jump right into this question. As the head of Crittenton Services, we actually understand caregiving burnout, and it is very real. So we serve over 500 teen girls in Montgomery County, Maryland, and in the District of Columbia in a weekly program. Pre-pandemic was in school, and then of course, just like everyone else, had to pivot to this new virtual world. And so top of mind for me, and thank you for this question, is that work-life balance, and having to do more with less. The pandemic certainly stretched our resources, because we suddenly went from serving our teen girls to serving their families. And we were directly providing emergency funding, groceries, et cetera, technology devices to our families and to our teen girls. And so what does that mean, work-life balance? Well, for me personally, it meant really taking a break during the day. I walk every single day. I have an iWatch, and I have over 500 days recorded of consistently walking. And I recognize that just 10 minutes in nature, it's been proven, can certainly increase your mental wellness. So that is a part of what I do now, and those that work with me know that's what I will be doing that. But I've also built that into our weekly meetings with our teams, which are of course, virtual. So we have on our staff someone who is an expert in meditation, deep breathing, wellness techniques. So she leads our team every week, and it's for our team members, but also to share with our teen girls and how they open up their group sessions weekly with the girls as well to deal with their stress. And then for me personally, it's signing off. I have a strict deadline. My last email that I check is 8 p.m. And the first email I check is when I get to the office at 8:30. So I definitely have that time that I turn off now, and I spend that time with my family. But for my team, what that means is, because we're a nonprofit, I can't offer, these huge bonuses, et cetera, as the private sector would be able to do. So what I do is time off. And we have instituted closing early on Fridays through the end of this year. We offer flex time to our team members, and we also have access to a psychologist for our team members. And initially, we had employed the psychologist to help with the problem solving that some of our teen girls and their families experience. But now she's available to our team members. When they are having a tough day, they have someone that they can reach out to, and then she can recommend further services for them if they so need it.
Wow, that's amazing. And I just want to hop in. We're going to move your 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. I'm just saying. Okay. Anybody else want to chime into that and answer that question?
I can add to that. I'm Keith Fanjoy with Sanmar Family and Community Services. One of the things that came to mind as Siobhan was talking was we do a lot of team building activities over the past 6 months, particularly. The first year of the pandemic was a lot of kind of flexibility and the grind a little bit of what was needed to kind of get through. And then we got to a point, obviously, where that was not sustainable, right? So with some of the restrictions that opened up during the summer, we immediately kind of had some things planned where, like our mental health team, we sent them to this funky thing that's in our community where you can drive construction equipment. And it was just like a silly thing that they did together and raced each other in skid steers. Our foster care team, they went and did the color splash in our community. Point is, pandemic is kind of difficult to find the time to do that safely, and trying to figure out how to do that. But it was a strategic decision to find ways to do team building so that there was a desire and a safe place at work with your peers. So that's just one other thought.
Amazing, Keith. I like the whole being able to operate machinery, taking your mind off of things and allowing you to process something that's not light and heavy. That's exciting. So with so many organizations offering, Siobhan mentioned it earlier about not able to offer bonuses like for-profit organizations do. And there's so many other organizations out there offering competitive wages and minus the stress that we have to experience. How have each of you managed staff shortages? What are some ideas for those who struggle with identifying these new staff people or to direct staffers, especially for our direct care workers? What can you offer our participants today?
I can jump in just with a couple of ideas that we have instituted. I know always our sort of recruitment strategy has been recruitment via relationships. And I feel like that has really been even more intentional over the last 18 months because of the staff shortages, as you mentioned. So first and foremost, anyone who is working with us, as a leader on the team, I think it's important for all of those people. And we've been fortunate that we have those sort of people on our team who are committed and passionate about the mission and vision and don't treat it as a job. And I say that because they show up, they put in the extra hours, the work, they do things without being asked. And of course, that's important. And it was especially important over the last 18 months where, even I've covered a class, and had to jump in and do things that, again, outside of this new normal may not have been the case. And so then going back to just the recruitment via relationships, we have really tried to rely on the partnerships and even relationships with the current staff. So even one of the things that we did for all of the staff and direct service, as you mentioned, our direct service, our teachers, our instructors, was offer a very small, but a referral incentive. And so, you know, we asking them, who do you know, who's in your network, who can you, you know, tell us, tell about LTYC and the work that we're doing, who would be interested, and giving them an incentive to share, you know, the different areas that we might be hiring in. And then again, just, you know, going directly to colleges and universities. We were knocking on those doors, you know, trade schools. I mean, again, just going back to the creative piece and trying to think of places that we hadn't tapped into before, to try to really cultivate some new staff.
Dana, thank you. And I'm going to put you on the spot with a question. So you talked about giving a small referral bonus, right? You talked about your staff being tied to the mission and committed, right? So, you know, sometimes when we're on burnout and we're exhausted and we're tired, we may not always be feeling that warm and fuzzy, bubbly feeling on the inside about our organization, about getting up and coming to work. So for those who, you know, may not be as, you know, as much in a positive space, really, right? How do we leverage those employees to make recommendations, make positive recommendations?
I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about over the last 18 months and tried to redirect people to is the why. And even as the leader, you know, I've had days where, you know, I have to look at myself in the mirror and I have to give myself my pep talk, you know, and say, you can do it. This is, you know, this is what we're doing and you got to accomplish this today. But for me, it always connects back to the why, right? Why am I here? You know, just the timing, that believing that I'm in this role at this time for a reason, and trying to, you know, communicate that and inspire our staff in the same way. Because there are always going to be challenges. The pandemic was a huge challenge, right? But there are always going to be challenges in the work that we're doing. And I think it's important to always, for us to connect our staff, especially the people who I always say, you all are doing the toughest work. You know, you are on the front lines, you know, with these children and their families, you know, providing a service, a resource, a support. And so you have to, like you said, despite what might be going on inside, you have to show up. You've got to be positive. And so for me, it connects back to, you know, why did you get into this work? You know, what type of impact that you want to make, and just sort of reminding yourself about that sometimes on a daily basis so that you can show up and, you know, work through those challenges and the tough times.
Great. Anybody else want to share with some ideas on how to really identify these new staffers that we need?
I just want to say that you never want to miss a critical incident. We've all been in this critical incident for the past 18 months. And I think the purpose work of bringing that forward, whatever it is that your organization does, making sure that you're talking about it a lot and retaining the staff that you have. So recruitment is a huge issue. We're only in the beginning part of this workforce tsunami. I imagine that the turnover rate is going to increase. We're going to have particular crises in our healthcare system, which in behavioral health, which is where my organization lives, we're seeing it already, where people are tired and burned out, trying to find those things that keep people engaged by reminding them about the work that you do. And so some simple tools that I've been using is really hammering our core values, talking about the core values of the organization in an every other week message that I send out, and making sure that I enrich it with purpose statements and videos and things that make it fun so that people want to come to work. And I will tell you that the opportunity to build your culture during this difficult time into a way that you're really thinking about wellness and resilience it's a fantastical time to do that, and maybe changing the rhythm a bit about what that works like. We're a 24/7 organization. We are essential health. And one of the things that we have done for recruitment is really go out and talk to people about what it is that we do, using that recruitment bonus doubling our recruitment bonus. But I think that another element, kind of going back to the retention piece, if you are in essential healthcare and you are doing something that didn't stop during the pandemic, the state of Maryland created a COVID EAP response team, and you can have that available to support your teams, to come in and do group work with them, to do healing and recovery for them. It has been amazing for the Board of Child Care. We have a person coming in and doing work with our senior leaders on a regular basis. They came to our executive leadership team when we did our retreat. I mean, it is an amazing thing that the state of Maryland did to support all essential health. And if you're interested in that, I'll look to see about finding the link to that to share with everybody. But it was free, no cost, and they used CARES money to pay for that.
That's amazing. I hadn't heard about that. That's an awesome resource. If you could definitely find that, LA, we would appreciate that. So as we're talking, Dana talked about it, about that, building and cultivating those relationships and partnerships. So in this pandemic, how have you been able to sustain identifying the relationships and then build those? Anybody?
I think the key for Crittenton Services and sustaining and building relationships is that we really had communications. And what I did, when March 13th, 2020, when the world literally shut down, was to have very frequent and authentic communications with our stakeholders, and that of course includes our employees who were on the front lines and continue to be on the front lines, but also our stakeholders, our we call them our champions, our friends, and also our teens and families, and letting them know where the organization was, how we were helping, what we could do. We also did surveys with our stakeholders as well, and particularly with the teen girls. We wanted to know how we could be a resource to them. So we found out that, what their essential needs were in terms of just those very basic items, but also in terms of their mental health needs. So we were able to hire 2 resource coordinators whose only job was to help with those mental health resources and connecting our teens and families to that. But also, I would say that in terms of my partnerships and all, just communicating frequently with our funders, having one-on-one conversations, having the hard talks, letting them know where we were with our finances, letting them know the depth of services that we were providing for our teen girls and their families. We held town halls. We invited local leaders to meet with our teen girls so that they could talk about the real impact of the pandemic on their lives and their families' lives. A lot of our teens were, their families were considered essential workers. So our teens had lots of fears around contracting COVID because mom and dad are going into work every day and may or may not have had proper PPEs to protect them as well. So, so we were, I think, yes, the sustaining and building of partnerships was certainly related to strategic communications and very frequent communications with all of our stakeholders.
Great, great. So I'm going to hop to the next question. And Keith, if you can kick this one off for us, and then after Keith, I want everyone to chime in, please. Share with us probably the greatest unforeseen challenge that you experienced during this 18 months. And then when you share that, how did you handle it? And based on how you handled it, what was the outcome? So if Keith could go first, please.
Yeah. So, I think it's pretty normal that in the administration role that you're going to run into HR related issues, personnel types of issues, and having kind of a consistent, steady approach to how you deal with that and are supporting folks has kind of always been our hallmark. But we definitely had some situations during these 18 months that we're still going through, where people that are very high quality, reliable people that have a lot of integrity and do things the right way didn't just fall apart in terms of maybe their employee effectiveness or the services. Those are kind of like task related things, but their behavior sometimes would change in a way that was just so inconsistent with who they were, and so we know that these are most likely people going through trauma. They're going through a major situation at home. They're going through a major situation in society all around them. And I think the big challenge for us as an organization is like, we still have to do the work, right? We still have to show up and do these things. And so we've always kind of created a space of flexibility and support because we're trauma informed in terms of how we work with kids and families. We're certainly going to be that way with the staff that we have. So in those dynamics, and the serious ones, there was only a few, but I think the key for us was to do the things that we do anyway with kids and families with those staff, which was be supportive, listen, and try our best to understand the situation, even if that individual wasn't really sharing out the whole story of what was going on. And then ultimately be clear on what the expectations were. But those are sticky situations right now with COVID, because I think everybody in administration understands it's a hard time. It's a super hard time. And, there's our desire to be as flexible and accommodating as possible. There's limits to that because we still have to accomplish the task in front of us. And so it's not really an answer that has a great ending solution on my end. I think it's more just an acknowledgement that those are realities that we're dealing with. And I think the biggest message that I would have is that from a leadership standpoint, taking a step back, catching your breath and seeing it for what it is, and being consistent in the response has been effective in very difficult situations when they've happened.
Thank you, Keith. LA?
I would just say that making sure that I contextualize things, and the challenge of having all kinds of people with all kinds of challenges in trying to do the work, just like he said. I mean, being able to make sure that people show up. And I'll tell you, in the very beginning of the pandemic, when lots of people were able to stay home and we had to come to work, my biggest fear was that people wouldn't come to work because it was a very scary time. And creating a system where you had a plan A, B, C, D. I mean, I was planning on working the floor at one point in time, and no one ever wants to see that happen because that's just not a good sign. But, we had a plan for that, and making sure that the people who were plan B, C, and D were prepared and ready to go for that. And we did a lot of planning for scenarios that we didn't want to see happen, so that we could be prepared for whatever did happen. And we used a lot of time getting through stages and steps and procedures, and just doing kind of fire drills, as it were, so that we could be prepared in case those things happen. And I remind you, we know a lot more now than we did in the very beginning. And I think in the very beginning is when we did the most learning. And one of the most interesting things that I learned in this experience was sometimes when you know more than other people do, because you're in it every single day, you have to give consultation to people who have the power to help them make decisions. And we were helping make decisions about how to do visitation with kids. And sometimes we were being told things that we didn't think were in the best interest of kids and families. And so we would say, hey, wait a minute. And we learned how to actually challenge the process sometimes, because normally, licensing and the powers that be will say, these are how you're going to do things. Well, there wasn't anyone there giving us guidance. So we had to do the best we could to make some rules for ourselves. And I think, that sense of making sure that you're making the best decisions you can with not a whole lot of information was probably one of those things that was pretty testing. And I've never lived through a pandemic before, and I think this agency grew a lot during the experience, learned a lot more about how to handle a crisis and the sorts of services and supports you need to have around that to make that happen.
Well, I would say we had a very unexpected challenge during this time period. We actually had a ransomware attack, and our computer systems were down for 8 weeks. And prior to that, we had had some discussions around like data security and what that looks like. And so it certainly sped up that conversation. And what I will share a couple of things that I learned from the attack, because at first it just felt like, well, why us? We're just a small nonprofit doing good work. But it turns out that we're just a number that is sold with millions of other numbers, and that these attackers will just buy these lists, and they go through the list trying to find an entry point into what you think is secure data. And we were never really able to track 100% how they got in, but we did see where they had a couple of entry points, where they attempted a couple of entry points, and they were not able to breach the data, but were essentially able to do it at some point. So what we had to do in answer to that, of course, our board got involved and have been extremely supportive, because we've had to make an investment in our data security. And so we had to invest in moving our data from a server that was in the basement of our building to moving all of our data to the cloud. We've had to invest in software security detection as well. And then also for our employees, we had to invest in software security for them, because their private information had now been exposed and more than likely had been sold within seconds of the attacker getting access to our information. We did not pay the ransomware. We talked to experts in the field that say never, ever, ever pay the ransomware, because what generally happens once they breach your security and have access to your data, they've already lifted everything that they want. And that the ransomware is just a bonus for them. If they can get you to pay it, great. If they can't, they're going to sell all of this personal information back on the dark web. So that was eye-opening, and a story that I do share with others, particularly other small nonprofits like ourselves, that it's imperative that you make that investment in your technology and in your security, because from what the experts are sharing, the pandemic increased these attacks, increased this form of really a crime, and that it's not going away. It's just going to continuously happen as we work from home or have hybrid work schedules. So these people have a lot of time on their hands. The other point that I will just make very quickly is that one of our consultants' brother works for the FBI. So we did consult with him as well. And he said, it's fine, you can bring the FBI in. They probably will not be able to find the attackers, because they're hidden behind so much security, and they could be, anywhere in the world committing these kinds of crimes. And if you do call in the FBI, then they will freeze all of your systems for the amount of time it takes for them to come in and do the kind of investigation that they would do. So we didn't call in the FBI, and instead, as I said, made a very strong investment in our technology, because we definitely see the future of our organization being a hybrid work schedule. So we had to make this investment today.
Wow. Thank you. Dana?
I agree with everything that everyone has said. Thankfully, we did not have a ransomware attack, so I can't agree to that, but we did have to up the ante on our security systems as well. I think probably in terms of unforeseen challenges for me, and this is really kind of a blend of personal and professional, was the blending of work and at home. When the pandemic, again, March 13th, always a day we'll remember. I have 3 children. And so I had a 1-year-old at the time, 3-year-old, and then thankfully I had a teenager. So just transitioning into being at home with them. My mom had previously taken care of the little ones. She was, of course, at risk, so she couldn't keep them anymore. So that meant that they had to be at home with me. My husband is a firefighter, so he was out of the house. So, that was definitely unforeseen challenge. I can remember even when things, started to be on the news prior to the 13th, and we said, oh, school isn't going to close. They're not going to close schools for a week, and then it was a week. And then we were like, they're not going to close for the rest of the year. And so like every, when Governor Hogan was making those announcements every week, we were like, on the edge of our seats and just in disbelief, and that schools were closed as long as they were. So I think that for me was the biggest challenge. And again, still trying to find balance in, working and full-time and being a mom and, taking care of family and just what that looks like. I can even now today, my daughter is 4. And when I go upstairs where my office is located, she's like, I don't want you to work. Do you have to go to work? So even just kind of, the guilt, I think. And so, I think that the pandemic, hopefully good will come out of it, because I know, there were tons of mothers across our country specifically who were challenged during this pandemic. I have friends who had to leave careers that they loved because they had to be at home with their children and they just couldn't balance. And so just as it relates to, our childcare system and how our government has supported our families or not supported our families, working families with childcare. I'm hoping that those issues, I think they were always issues, but I think the pandemic has helped to highlight some of those even economic and racial disparities for working women. So I'm hoping that it'll get better, but definitely that was probably my biggest challenge, was just trying to, find the balance, being on meetings and, trying to quiet the children down. And so it was a circus for many, for many weeks.
Wow. Thank you all for sharing those challenges. And Ali, I think you said it, we have a journey still ahead of us that's unforeseen still. We're still learning. So I'm going to ask this question too. And if you all can chime in, all 4 of you, starting with Keith again. How has the pandemic impacted your financial bottom line? Because all of us have been impacted. And I'm looking at the news this morning, just seeing the inflation and how they have projected it's going to continue to get worse. How has the last 18 months affected the bottom line? And how have you diversified revenue to ensure viability?
Yeah, I think the healthiest organizations have multiple revenue streams, right, from different contracts or different entities. And we were fortunate that we have kind of 3 primary revenue streams. Our first, we operate an outpatient mental health clinic. And so those reimbursements come through insurance, primarily medical assistance. Our treatment foster care program is through the state rate that we receive for children in care. And then we run a large community-based prevention program that is run through grants. I think the 2 biggest areas that we've had financial challenges are related to our treatment foster care census, just the normal reduction of that census, because there are just a lot of challenges over time with recruiting and retaining foster parents right now in the midst of the pandemic, as well as the nature of the referrals that are coming to us during this time. There's just different challenges with that. Also, we, from our budget perspective, we build in expectations around fundraising and philanthropy. And so a lot of that is designed around individual contributions and special events. And so during the pandemic, particularly last year, a lot of those opportunities were very difficult from a relationship building standpoint for our development person to get out there and meet people and do the things that she's very good at. So we've been very fortunate, just like many other organizations, to benefit from the federal dollars that have come through, payroll protection program and employee retention credit, those kinds of things. Those have been very helpful. And I would say that the best part of those have been the kind of lack of strings on them, just that we were able to kind of drop them into operations. I think as we move forward, and I think about how we best tackle the needs of each of these specific service lines, the mental health center that we have has tremendously benefited from telemedicine, that kind of ability to provide services remotely. That has allowed that program to kind of be leading the way for our organization in terms of revenue. So I just think staying flexible and nimble with different ways to provide services in this new normal, that's what you're calling this training, right? In this new environment that we're in, is going to be the requirement. I think all of us would probably say it, or maybe not say it out loud, that the benefits of those federal dollars that we received were tremendous. We're still in the midst of dealing with all of these situations. Until we're out of it, there really does need to be some exploration about what additional dollars might look like at some point before the pandemic is over, because those dollars really address a lot of the kind of undefined problems that are a part of operating an organization during the pandemic. So that's kind of my wish, my dream for Karan to go out there and wave the wand and make happen, is for
I'm working on it.
Yeah, the federal government and Maryland, really it's those federal dollars, because the state of Maryland dollars are wonderful additions, but it's those federal dollars that are significant dollars that are going to help the bottom line financially for organizations like ours during this period, until we're able to kind of get back to a little bit more routine operations.
Thank you, Keith. Dana?
Sure. So in terms of our bottom line, I think this was a huge lesson for us, and a lesson that we knew. But again, the pandemic, I feel like, just highlighted a lot of things that were already there. So our organization, in terms of revenue, is mostly funded through fee for service. We do get a lot of grants as well, but the majority is fee for service. So of course, when things shut down, and for at least a couple of weeks, because we didn't immediately start providing instruction virtually, because there were, again, systems that had to be put in place, training that had to be done. There were, at least 2 to 3 weeks where we weren't providing anything. And so, of course, if you're not providing the service, you can't be paid. And so I think it was a lesson, again, that we kind of already knew, but had to move with urgency around diversifying the income, and how we can, again, just be more intentional about applying for grants and increasing our individual donors and corporate sponsorships. And so that also, just in terms from an HR perspective, put some things in place from, in terms of development, so that that would be possible. And that, again, if we were in this situation again, or something like it, or even if we aren't, we're not so reliant on the direct services part of our model. What I will say, again, is just, I think, also being creative, and like Keith mentioned, being flexible. We tried to respond to the need. We were very fortunate. We definitely, took some losses. So I think, like he said, any healthy organization even suffered some amount of loss. For us, it wasn't monumental, because we were able to respond, which we often try to do, to the need in the moment. And so we actually created an entire program in Howard County, the Howard County Scholars Program, that was specifically for middle school students to participate in these learning hubs. So we worked with the county and the Office of the Local Children's Board there, and set up 5 learning hubs at their 50+ centers. And so the students came Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, got online and did their classes. And then we did enrichment and social emotional learning and college and career readiness, and created a curriculum for that. And so that allowed us to, have some revenue and be able to sustain with some other areas where we had to, again, take a loss. So I think just thinking through and trying to be responsive to, again, the communities that, we all are serving. And I even, somebody else mentioned about talking to your stakeholders and increasing that communication to make sure that you know what the needs are. And then, as the leaders, being creative about how you can respond to those needs.
Thank you. LA and Siobhan.
I'll go ahead and take it. Unfortunately, Board of Child Care wasn't eligible for the PPP. So we it was definitely been a challenge, and about 70% of our costs are in staffing. And I remember making a significantly bad decision in the beginning. I thought this pandemic, and this is just sharing naivete, but I thought, well, this pandemic's going to last about 2 weeks, like it's a snow emergency, and I'm going to give people an extraordinary workload bonus. And I made the decision collectively with a couple of people and said that's what we were going to do. Lo and behold, the thing went really a long, long time. As we're still in it, we had to figure out a way to taper the extraordinary workload bonus because it was bankrupting us. So, and again, we're 24/7. Everybody was getting something more. And I, again, imagined that people were not going to come to work. They came to work anyway. But the process of being under issues with quarantine, kids couldn't come in. We have large programs that deal with kids who cross the border. The kids crossing the border weren't coming in. And honestly, we're still digging out from the economic burden that we experienced. And depending on the state in which we operate, because we're operating in several states, each state handled things a little bit differently. Each county handled things a little bit differently. And being poised and ready to go after FEMA money, so PEMA money, MEMA money, that's federal emergency money. That's been one of the things that we've been able to do to take care of things. But it's now for us, it's a reach back instead of a reach ahead, and kind of going back to the flexibility of the states that we work in, or in the state of Maryland. Honestly, the responsiveness to the crisis and the lack of being able to help us out in the moment, it just hasn't been there. And I think the next thing that we're going to see is that continued crisis with our pay rates in human services aren't stacking up against Amazon's and all those distribution centers. And yeah, we can dangle purpose in front of people for quite a while, and it really does encourage people's hearts and gets them to do this work. But the bottom line is people need to feed their family. And even with a living rate, we pay better than the minimum wage for people who come in and do work for us with high school diplomas, but it's not enough. And we've needed to figure out ways to make adaptations. But the rate setting process in the state's really slow. And its care and feeding of that safety net that we have in Maryland needs a better responsiveness to it. So I just say we're going to need to, as an association, really figure out how we bob and weave and work on finding a way to answer some of those financial issues. I don't even think that people even know how bad it is financially yet, because people are still digging out. If I'm still digging out, I know other people are still digging out. We don't know, and we're still in it. And I guess it's just one of those things I throw out to MARFY and say, we'll need your leadership on making sure that the people doing this very special work in human services are being paid a competitive rate.
Absolutely. Siobhan.
Well, I agree with all that's been said. I think the key is flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. We are still digging out as well. We had a decrease in revenue from 2020 to 2021 by about 9.5%, which is impactful for an organization of our size. And so the majority of our funding is government funding, local government funding. So we were very much concerned because there was a lot of uncertainty initially and whether our local governments would be able to continue funding us at all, or if they were, at what cost, at what size of the grant. So we were very fortunate that the federal government did step in, but I'm in agreement with Keith. My wish list is that there's another intervention because we are not through this, and there's no end in sight at this point. And I know that this particular panel discussion is called New Normal, and I think we're not in the new normal. I think we're still trying to define what the new normal is. So what have we done to help diversify our funding? We had to make an investment in development, and had to bring in a specialist who could help us devise a strategy and look at our individual giving strategy and increasing that, because research shows that the growth for nonprofits really is with individual giving. So we've had to implement some strategies there. We've had to really be strategic about our board and making certain that we're getting the right board members in certain sectors that can help us penetrate those sectors and introduce us to new sources of funding. We were very fortunate that we've added 2 new phenomenal board members to already a great board. And one of them said to us, the reason she joined was that we were continuing our services and deepening our services during the pandemic. And so she wanted to be a part of an organization that was being creative in terms of how we continue to serve our teen girls. So I was really happy to hear her say that. And that falls back to that strategic communications that I was sharing earlier, and how we were frequently communicating what we were doing and what the needs were with our teen girls. So very, very good question. And like I said, my wish list is that that we can lobby our federal government to continue to provide the services to all of us who are doing such great work on the ground.
Absolutely. So this is the conversation, even as people are transitioning back into the workspace, and some people, you mentioned, Siobhan, that you are going to remain hybrid. So as we think about working remotely, and which most of us did who were not essential workers, what has been your experience with working remotely for you and your staff? What are the challenges associated with working remotely? And I'm going to even say, what effects does this have on your organization in the future if you continue to work remotely? So let's chime into that conversation, working remotely.
I would start by saying working remotely, it's great. It has its advantages, but I'll tell you, we're missing out on some things. Micro expressions and brains getting scrambled by the end of the day. Thank goodness for it. But I think I can't wait to see the research on what it's done to people's brains, because I know it's done something to mine. I get all frazzled up here. But I think that being the organization that has needed to be hands-on, we have actually come up with some opportunities for some people to work some of the time remotely. And we just decided to make some decisions for some positions to be remote 100% of the time. And I would say that it is a challenge trying to compete actually for the workforce. People want to work from home now. A lot of people really want to do that. And actually some people really want to come to work and work with other people. So we're trying to find that right blend of opportunities for people in this organization and finding flexibility. And Keith said it earlier, thank goodness for telehealth. We've been able to do some things like that. But honestly, with some of the people that we work with, they really need that face-to-face, and they need actual hands-on. So it isn't possible for us to be 100% remote, but I do like the flexibility and how it's made us think about it in a brand new way. So hail to technology, but you need a break for your brain. I love the idea of walking around. That's a good idea to keep yourself grounded, because I don't think it's great for my brain, and maybe it's just because mine's a little bit older.
Anyone else? And those are, I see the questions in the chat. We're going to definitely come to those next. Anyone else want to chime in about working remotely?
Sure, I'll chime in. Just a fun fact talking about the effects on our brain. I was at the eye doctor a couple of days ago, and she was explaining that a lot of people, myself included, have developed dry eye, which I'm by no means in the medical field, but she was explaining that because we are staring at a computer screen all day, that's something else, I guess, in her research and everything that has developed. So I think it'll be interesting to look at all of the different impacts. I'm just thinking, not even from neurologically and medically, but of course, emotionally, socially. We can talk about the children and the impact that has had with them being out of school for so long. But anyway, working remotely, I think in terms of, you mentioned, challenges, I think for us, the biggest piece was, I would say, accountability. We always really kind of had a hybrid system because we all were required to have home offices and, would come to the office for meetings, but not necessarily, reporting to the office every day. But even with things being completely remote, I think it was, just again, a lesson in accountability. And for us, putting stronger systems in place in terms of collaboration, tracking tasks, things that we might have been working together on teams. And so I think that was probably the challenge initially, just making sure that there were touch points, because we did, initially or before the pandemic, we would again have meetings where we were coming together. So I don't want to over meet, but it's still, because everybody's kind of off doing their own thing in their own home offices. I did feel a need in the beginning, especially to meet more with our team, just to know what everybody is doing and to make sure that everybody's on track, because again, we're all balancing, different situations and circumstances. But yeah, so I think that's been one of the challenges, but I think we definitely, to everybody else's point, have sort of come out, at least on that piece, on the other side, and have had some lessons that now we can continue implementing even whenever we get to be post-pandemic.
I just add one thing to that. Accountability is definitely, it might sound like the wrong word, but I totally agree with it in terms of the challenge from an administrator. You're trying your best to get certain things done while also accounting for all the problems that are out in society. One of the things that with kind of hybrid work and folks out there that are sometimes at home, sometimes here, that has been effective is we give a lot of flexibility, but now there's even more emphasis on the key results that are expected. And so we'll provide a list with that employee that says, let's, we have routine supervision pre-COVID, right? But now there's like a list developed that talks about these are the key expectations and tasks. So like if you've worked for the federal government or one of those entities, you're familiar with kind of the work report that you have to generate that shows this is what I did this week. We kind of do that in advance. That talks about these are the key expectations that your schedule, what you need to accomplish in terms of these core tasks. If somebody gets to the end of the week, there's a trust element in terms of the hours worked, an integrity element there. But if all those tasks are done and it's been done effectively and in a way that is consistent with who we are, then during the pandemic, it's okay. It's like the work got done. And so I think just that little strategy of creating a punch list in advance in your routine supervision that talks about these are the key deliverables. You might do that with like a vendor normally, or somebody that's doing construction in your house. But when it comes to supervision, you may not get that task oriented. It kind of feels like micromanaging, right? But to do that actually is helpful because you're wanting to give that person flexibility. And so by giving them that key areas of accomplishments during the week, you set them free to accomplish that in the schedule that makes sense for them.
Thank you. So going to the chat real quick, we have a question from the app. And this two-part question. And the second part is, when can we drop the new normal and say just normal? So I just want to say, I don't think we can drop the new normal because every day is changing. And so therefore we don't have anything that's normal or consistent. But I want to hear from our panel. The first part of the question is, I am interested in hearing more about how organizations are addressing reluctance on the part of front-facing staff returning to on-site employment. That's a great question. I'm sure it's a challenging question for many. Anybody want to chime? Ella, you want to chime in on that one?
I'm trying to find the question. Can you say it one more time?
I have it. So I can put it in the chat, but it's basically how are you addressing staff that are reluctant to returning to on-site employment?
Well, that's a good one. Getting people back to work. The best way to get them back to work is to not let them ever go home. Because we are essential healthcare, everybody kept coming to work every day. We had a couple people who got to work from home, and we had people do kind of rotation. But I'll tell you, that gave us the lead for getting people back to work and having our school 100% back in session. I think we were the first non-public to do that because we never stopped. So I'm probably the worst person to answer that, because if people didn't, if they couldn't come to work, they couldn't have a job, because you can't do our work from home.
Wow.
And even as a leader, I could have stayed home, but leaders don't stay home. If everybody else was here, I needed to come to work. And so that's what I did. So, we are unique in that, nobody was really thinking about that, but we are like the continuing care retirement communities. We were still here all the time. And it gave us that advantage to not have to figure that part out. So we lost people because they couldn't work from home. Because I'm thinking about poor Dana. There were some people who didn't have people to take care of their kids. And what were they going to do? And they went on COVID unemployment because we needed them to show up for work. And so that's a unique twist, but thanks for letting me know.
I guess, LA, to your point that people, had to come in, how did you handle people who didn't want to be around people when it comes to like being vaccinated, not vaccinated? Like that's a whole nother component.
Well, currently, and this will get everybody wound up, but we have decided we're waiting for other people to lead the vaccination thing. And once the state says you must be vaccinated, we'll require that. In DC, our services down there are 100% vaccinated, because Mayor Bowser said that's what you're going to do, and now you must do that, and have rules for that, and it was all done. And we're not requiring people. We have been encouraging it. We are trauma informed. We're trying to make sure that people do what they need to do. We've been using our doctors to try to help people feel comfortable, but we're not at 100% vaccination yet. And I am deeply concerned that when we become 100% required to be vaccinated, what that workforce tsunami will look like, because we're seeing it in healthcare, we're seeing it in the police force, and I'm worried about that, because I got people here who need care, and I can't just close that house because we don't have enough staff. I've got kids living there. So it does create a very important challenge. You may say, well, what is that about the safety for the children? You don't care about the children. And certainly I've been managing that question too, but what about the people and their choice to make that decision? So we've been really working on that, and it has been improving, but we haven't seen much improvement in the last probably 6 months. We probably got to where we're going to get for the moment, and then we'll see what happens. But I do imagine that's going to be a huge issue for us.
Wow. Anyone else regarding people who you may have transitioning back to the office and they're reluctant to doing that, being on site?
Well, I will share that, that doomsday March 13th, 2020, our program team, who normally would be going into schools to deliver programs, became 100% remote. I can certainly share with LA as the head of the organization. I came in, there were a couple of us that did. We all stayed in separate offices and social distance from one another, but I felt as though I needed to be here. And Dana, I certainly, when you were speaking about being a working mom at home with the wee ones, my heart just went out for you, because we had program leaders with wee ones, and we tried to give that mom as much flexibility as we could. We had two moms, actually, one with a newborn and one with a toddler. So we tried to give them flexibility, that as long as they were meeting their deliverables, because we have contracts with government agencies, we have to report on a monthly basis what we're doing. And so we have internal weekly reporting that has to be done. So we had to be flexible as long as they were meeting those deliverables. Then if they were doing it at odd hours that were, outside of the 9 to 5, that worked, as long as they were just getting their job done. Now that we are back, we had to have talks with our team, because we had to follow the mandates that are in the school districts that we serve. So we as an organization have not required the vaccine, but the school districts that we serve have instituted their own policies. I'm happy to say that our program leaders did do that and did get their vaccines in order to work in the schools and serve the girls, because we needed to get back to in-person delivering of our services. We could not sustain being virtual. And so we had to do that and had to have talks with our team, who thankfully were excited to get back into the school so they could be with the girls face to face. So I think that has been our remote work experience. But I do think, as I said, what the pandemic has shown us is that we're going to have to maintain that hybrid schedule. Usually our entire team would come to our offices on Friday. We had a team meeting, they took care of reporting, all kinds of things, and we're not doing that any longer. So our team meeting has moved to a virtual space, and individually team members can come in to do reporting and hand in receipts and invoicing and all of that. So and I do see that as our future as we move forward. But anyway, so I may not have been the best person to answer this remote question, because we had to get back into schools. So we needed our team to be on board with that.
Keith or Dana, either one of you have disgruntled employees who just maybe didn't want to come back and they fought against it?
I wouldn't say disgruntled, because I think even both of the ladies have spoken. I mean, for some things, it just is what it is. Like that is the job that you have to be in person. What I will say, I was going to add just two things. One is that we created, it was actually pre-pandemic that we were supposed to launch it, but we launched it during the pandemic, was a virtual arts platform. And so that has allowed us to create opportunities for those people who do not want to return in person, now that most of our programs have returned in person, that we're still delivering professional development, parent engagement, and even classes, arts classes virtually. So we've been able to say, okay, if you're, not comfortable with going back into a classroom, then maybe you want to look at this opportunity. And so at least we can offer an alternative, and, that's up to the person whether or not they want to take it. And then the other thing I would offer is just trying to be very clear with what the protocols were. When we did our program in Howard County, we were back in person, obviously doing that program, and had, direct service staff going every day. So there was definitely, especially then before the vaccines had come out and all of that, some reservations about, being in person and what that looks like. So we just, again, sat down, had those check-ins, those personal conversations one-on-one, and went over, these are the protocols. So they'll be, wiped down every 30 minutes. And, this is how the testing is going to be done. And, just trying to make sure that they were aware of all of the things that we were at least trying to do to keep people as safe as possible. And then, again, ultimately, it's that person's decision, but that was how we tried to at least, handle some of those reservations with returning back in person.
Yeah, for us, we have been open the entire time, but obviously, unlike Board of childcare, we do not have residential on site, so that makes a huge difference. That's a fundamental difference, right? I mean, like to have somebody as a 24-hour operation. So, but because we've been open the whole time, one of the biggest advantages we had is a lot of office space. And so what that means is pretty much everybody throughout all of our buildings has their own enclosed space with a door. And so throughout this time, during the peak of the pandemic and throughout different periods, when we were kind of in that hybrid model, people had the option of coming into their workspace with our policy that allowed for kind of a social isolation, but still being able to access your resources and your space and come in. And then if you were in hallways or public spaces, social distancing with a mask mandate. So we had a brief period during the summer where a lot of those restrictions were lifted, but it was kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back at this point in the fall, where we have a mask mandate in place again and a lot of strong encouragement for vaccines. Like Board of childcare, at this point, we have not mandated vaccination. We have not only strongly encouraged it, but promoted it and tried to help folks get the vaccine. But the challenge for a private organization in mandating it is more than just a retention issue. It's also a legal issue in trying to figure out how we're going to, regardless of my strong desire for folks to get vaccinated, it just creates this dynamic of what does government think, and when is government going to make that decision that we can then come behind and support, as opposed to kind of all the nonprofit community, each individually being out on an island and having to make those directives on our end. Just one other thing, the front-facing part of it, as far as community members coming into our facilities, the way we've worked around that is to come into our building, you have to have a mask on. That's signs that are posted on our doors. And so we try to limit those amounts of folks that are coming into the building and kind of meet them outside. But during the pandemic, there were some very unique situations when it was very cold outside or very hot outside. And we learned a lot of lessons from people doing therapy in the park when it was 100 degrees outside, or meeting in the wintertime and doing things outside. And so we've tried to really focus on creating spaces with barriers and things like that in socially distanced spaces so that people can still get services, but staff feel that they're safe and clients have the knowledge that they're coming into a space that meets their needs.
Thank you. Great responses, everyone. And our very last question I have, we're going to 12:15, but I want to hop in and just share, have you share your thoughts on this. Because, and I say it again, we can't really stop saying new normal right now, and because until things really do normalize and become consistent. So I think that's why we do use that term new normal. But what are some potential future, and this is like a weird question, but what are some potential future unknowns, or that that potentially others haven't thought about, that we need to consider that would require ongoing adaptation? Require us to always be flexible and moving and bendable. And it's like, you just never know. And again, I know for MARFY members, that's just our life. Like every day there's something, again, from our higher ups that's giving us new mandates. What do you think are some unknowns that we need to be prepared for?
Won't be a surprise to everyone, but I believe we're only at the beginning part of workforce challenges.
What are some potential other workforce challenges other than lack of staff that you think?
I think it's starts and stops right there. Having staff to do the work is a huge challenge, and keeping people wanting to work in human services. I think there's a lot of competition, and I think there are people who are making some changes. I think sometimes bad things happen and people flock to do special work, and I think sometimes bad things happen and people flock away from it. And I think we're in a really interesting space right now where I think people are making decisions about how much time they want to be around other people. And I think that we will be a place where some people want to work and some people won't want to work here. So I think that human services, I think teaching, I think a lot of different professions are going to continue to be challenged. And the adaptation is making sure that you're talking about your purpose as much as you can, making a safe place where people can be resilient and have well-being. And it's hard to do that when everybody has so much stress on them, and people who we are serving are definitely much more challenged than they've ever been. All of the research is telling us that. The Association of American Pediatrics just said there's a child mental health crisis, and they made that statement. So the work isn't going to get easier. And I think that we just need to be coming together as a network, as groups of people, demanding better circumstances for the people that work in this business. And I think that we need to really look at how do we get a new tide of people wanting to work in the business of helping other people heal and recover from challenging circumstances.
Thank you. Siobhan or Dana, and I guess as we go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, LA, I think you nailed it. We're in the great resignation right now, and people are really taking this time to think about, their purpose and how they want to live their lives. And so it's a work reckoning. And I do believe that the employee attraction to this field and retention is something that we are going to have to look at collectively, and how we create that work-life balance for those who are on the front lines who will have caregiving fatigue. I think another unknown is funding, especially with our government. There could be, potential decrease of funding going forward for the health and human services field. And then I look at, companies now, foundations now, who are all about racial equity, all about gender equity, and all of the equities in there. And at some point, the pendulum may switch where that is not such a great priority. So looking at ways in which we can highlight the work in which we're doing, and showing funders how an investment in the great work that we're all doing is certainly something that helps us as a nation in general. If we're helping those who are most in need of being helped, and so therefore we can empower them, and so it just helps us as a society in general. And then I'm going to go back to technology. We are in this virtual world, whether we like it or not. There's going to be points where we do go back to some more in-person interaction, but I don't think that we will walk away from technology. So we really have to look at making an investment in our technology, and giving people the work-life balance. Will be able to do some of the work from home, and having the resources to be able to access that.
Dana, did you want to add anything?
I think those would be the two things I would say, connected to workforce and technology. The only other thought I had is just connected to HR, but what we've mentioned already as it relates to being vaccinated, and just how that has become hugely politicized, and just again what the unknown is, how that will show up in the workplace, not so much from an HR perspective, but just an interpersonal perspective of, who is, who isn't, what your reasons are. That just, at least in my world, has become a thing that I think won't go away anytime soon.
Great. So while I have you, Dana, we're going to do closing comments. And I think if each of you could give our leaders and listeners something positive to take away from today that will help them as leaders, that will encourage them in their teams or as a staff person in their organizations, or just give them a glimpse of hope for the future. Dana, and we'll take it from there.
Oh, I'm on the spot. So a couple of things come to mind. One is to continue to be creative and to be open and flexible to new possibilities and opportunities, and even, shifting the way that your organization has operated in the past, and just being open to thinking outside of the box and what new, pathways and communities you can reach, and just being creative. The second thing I would say is be quick, but don't hurry. We've had to make a lot of things happen over the last 18 months. And so we have a sense of urgency, but it's important also to find the balance, to take the time and to be careful about, what it is that we're doing, and giving all of the things that we've talked about, just giving everybody care and support and resources. And the third is, I would just say, have a support system, whoever it is that you're talking to, whether it's other people on your team, your family, friends, but have a support system and somebody that you can go to share, sometimes to vent, to have a drink with, whatever it is. But I think that that's important, to just, be able to talk and have somebody to lean on.
I'm so glad Dana went next first, because it gave me a chance to think about what I was going to say. So you did a great job, Dana, off the cuff. Awesome work there. That means you're constantly running after little kids, because you've got to be on the spot. So I would just say that I think there is a real opportunity and a renaissance for all the work that we do. I've never thought so much about resilience and well-being in my career, about how to take care of others in this work, but also there's so much interest. I have had so many people so interested in the work that I do now because of what's happening, and our opportunity about healing and recovering and taking care of people is, everyone's paying attention to the work we're doing right now, and that's really neat. And I think there's a real advantage to something bad happening. There always is. There's a silver lining in everything. And I hope for our industry that we take advantage of the opportunity to bring forward mental wellness and well-being. I think that it's an amazing opportunity that we're all given. And in my career, this is the first time that people have really been excited about the kind of work that happens. And I'm glad to see that happening in our country right now. It's awesome. And I'll turn it over to Siobhan.
Close us out.
Oh my goodness, this is hard being the bench hitter here. Dana and LA, you were phenomenal. And I agree with everything that was said. I think if there's one thing that I would say to all of the leaders here, is to take time to reflect and really congratulate yourself. This has been a difficult time. And it is something that happens every 100 years. So, take the time to really congratulate yourself on all of the hard work that you've done, all the accomplishments that you've made and your team has made, right? Because we wouldn't be here if we weren't still doing this great work. We wouldn't have this opportunity today to be on your panel and to participate on the panel and view the panel if we still weren't doing the great work that we sought to do. So please take that time to congratulate yourself. And something else that I share with my team, we are building this plane as we're flying it. So we have to give ourselves grace, and we have to give those that we work with grace, and we have to give the girls that we serve and their families grace at this point in time, because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. We don't even know what the next moment will bring. But what we do know is that we have been so creative, so flexible, so resilient, that it's gotten us to this point where we have had so much success in following mission and working in mission. And then with that, I will just close it out with, as LA said, Dana has said, this is such a great opportunity to share what we're doing. And LA is so right. The interest in our work, I think, has never been higher. And to take this opportunity to get to shout from the mountaintops all the great work that you're doing, because people are interested and they want to They want to help, they want to be involved, they just don't know how they can help you and the people that you serve. So take this time to really shout out all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you. I can just tell you from me to you, I'm giving you a round of applause. LA, Dana, Siobhan, you all, and Keith, who had to hop up for another call. He was multitasking. Thank you all for being phenomenal. I appreciate you. And I saw the comments in the chat. People are grateful for all of the wealth of knowledge that you've provided back. So I'm going to give everyone back, since we want to talk about self-care, work-life balance. I'm going to give people 6 minutes. I'll give it back to you to go take a bathroom break, grab some coffee, walk outside, whatever you need, and enjoy the rest of your day and have a safe weekend. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.